Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're logging in from. Welcome to the Feminist Juggling panel, Creating Inclusive Spaces in the Juggling Community. My name is Josie May, and I'll be moderating this conversation for the next 90 minutes. To begin, let's start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on stolen land, and as such, we are guests on these lands. Where I'm recording from, what we now call Portland, Oregon, and Multnomah County, are the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Clackamas, Clackamas, Cowlitz bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. We pay our respect to the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded the land throughout generations. If you saw the Renegade show a couple nights ago, Sam Malcolm at Sam Malcolm Show asked everyone watching to acknowledge the original people who lived on the land they occupy today publicly on their Facebook. So follow his advice. I also encourage you to do so after this panel. Let's start with some panelist intros. Each panelist has about 30 to 60 seconds to introduce yourselves. And let's start with Dallas.
Girl, you got to unmute yourself.
I swear I hit it. Hi, everybody. My name is Dallas. I've been doing flow arts and prop manipulation and circus-related things for the last 10 years, performing, producing, and playing. And I'm happy to be a part of this panel.
All right, on over to Lucy.
Hey, I'm Lucy. I've been juggling for about 13 years. I'm like an IGA juggler. I started as a hobbyist. I went to my first convention, a local one here in Atlanta, where I live, and then to the two IGAs that were in Winston-Salem. I work as a juggler, doing like corporate and private events in Atlanta. I've been a feminist for a long time. I'm transgender, so I'm a big like advocate for like LGBTQ representation. It's a mouthful. We all make mistakes sometimes, but yeah, that's me.
Mel.
I'm Mel. I've been studying raps for 10 years now. Doing aerial for maybe the last 5 or 6 years. Although with the pandemic, I haven't been doing any of that because there's no rigging here. And I identify as cis and straight, but I try to be an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. I acknowledge that I can't speak very much to any experiences other than my own. So I'm mostly here to listen to those voices as well and recognize that I have a lot of work to do there. I also want to acknowledge the land that I'm broadcasting from right now. I am in Fayetteville, West Virginia, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. These are the traditional territories of the Tutelo and Monoton tribes in my area. And I'm also trying to be more mindful of always acknowledging that anywhere that we go in the United States, we are on somebody's stolen land. And I think that that thought has to come first. Other than that, I am currently a graduate student in geophysics. I have a long road ahead of me, many more years of academia. And within my sort of academic realm, I try also to have these conversations about the intersectional nature of racial and social justice within the academic setting.
Thanks, Mel. On to Michaela.
Hello, my name is Michaela, currently broadcasting from Oakland, California, but originally from Madison, Wisconsin. I am she, her, they, them, or really anything respectfully thrown out there. I don't mind. I'm super excited to be talking on this panel. We initially started with a BIPOC panel, and just like it's progressed into gender, and I'm super excited to talk about this spectrum with these people because last time it went swimmingly. So I'm super excited to see the dialogue today.
Sonal?
Hey y'all, I'm Sonal Agrawal and I'm in Chicago and I am a flow me. I'm old school, I guess. I don't know what era I represent, but this is my first involvement with any sort of IJA anything because I have thought of it as a very male dominated space, and I would say cis male space, so maybe like get more gay men there and I would feel more comfortable as a woman. They're the only men that were ever truly safe around. And I love movement. Movement is, and the whole idea of occupied territory, I'm pretty sure that's a global conversation as well. And I mean, white people, you all came from somewhere. Indigenous white people, think about that. Mind's blown already. We're just getting started. Great. This is great.
And go for it, West.
I love that, Sonal. Hi, I'm West. I am queer and non-binary. My pronouns are they, them. I am broadcasting from unseceded Seneca Cayuga land in what is known as Ithaca, New York. I am a flow artist. I flow with hoops and staff and rope dart. Glad to be here on the panel and so grateful to be amongst very cool and very talented and very intelligent femmes to talk about the space we're going to be in and that we want to create.
Awesome. I'm so excited to get this panel started and that all of you are participating and here with us today. My name's Josie May. I've been juggling for 8 years, mostly clubs, and I've been doing some form of feminist juggling workshops and discussions for the past 2. I served on the IJA board of directors and I'm the current World Juggling Day program director. Outside of the IJA, I am a coordinator and coach of the Voice Project, a tuition-free year-long multidisciplinary training company for young adults experiencing marginalization and systemic oppression. And you can find us at Voice Project Circus. This panel is also a collaboration between the IJA and Circus Talk. And for those of you who don't know yet, Circus Talk is an international, inclusive, and independent online resource for the circus industry. They have a circus job board, event calendars, circus news section, and a lot more. You can find them at their website, circustalk.com. So this is going to be the most you'll probably hear me talk this panel. I just want to give a little overview and set some agreements. So our agenda, we're going to go through some past, present, future. We'll do a Q&A for everyone watching and then end with some closing statements. And this panel is an invitation. It's an invitation to question why these long overdue conversations, which are just now happening. And that's no shame to any individuals, organizations, but it's an invitation to question, why haven't we been talking about this publicly? And what are the systems in place that have prevented this? Or has it just been around and we've not been listening? This is an invitation to mess up, in that unlearning and fighting for equality is messy work, and that's okay. We agree if we use the wrong pronouns, we apologize and move on. I mess up, I will mess up, I will continue to mess up, and I'm willing to hold myself accountable for those mistakes and listen to those that I harm in messing up. This is also an invitation to listen and listen to all these amazing voices. And sometimes with listening comes a feeling of like a contraction. And it's an invitation to manage that contraction if we feel like defensive or ouch, or that's not fair. These conversations are not comfortable and you may feel activated in some way. And I encourage you to lean into that discomfort as much as you can. And if it is so much, take note of what's causing that. And if you need to take care of yourself in some way, do so and then come back to these conversations when you're in a less activated space. But really don't be afraid of that uncomfortability. This panel is an invitation to envision an inclusive and supportive future and to continue the conversation and do better in the future. A question that we talked about as a panel before this is, why are these panels and topics always afterthoughts? And I will propose a top way you can support panelists and support these conversations is by tipping them and paying for it. We have everyone's Venmos in the comments. They'll be posted a little bit throughout. If you donate to me at Josie Juggles on Venmo, I'll split it across all 7 of us, and I'll try and give you a little shout out during our panel. So a little added incentive. And just remembering to join a webinar and tap in and out of these conversations is a privilege. And I invite everyone to cultivate a value and worth of these experiences, because it is vulnerable, emotional, hard work that everyone is doing today, and it deserves to be financially compensated. Cool. So, a couple agreements. We are all the authors of our own stories. We don't speak for all women or NBs or femmes or the entire juggling community. And with that, we'll stay in our lanes. Our feminism is intersectional, which means it considers all the factors that apply to an individual in combination rather than considering each factor in isolation. So think like a Venn diagram. For example, the United States feminist movement has historically excluded Black women. Look that up. There are feminist groups that exclude trans women, that exclude sex workers, and we don't do that. We acknowledge the intersections of oppression and the unique realities that those intersections create. We also agree to take space and make space throughout the conversation. We honor consent always. We do not engage in tone policing, which is just detracting from the validity of a statement by attacking the tone in which it was presented rather than the message itself. And we also honor impact over intent. And a couple agreements for the chat. This is really a conversation and a space for women, femmes, and those under the non-binary umbrella to be prioritized. And I really want to prioritize those voices in the chat and in the questions. And so lastly, a core belief of all of this is that liberation and healing are possible, and that by doing this work, we are working towards a more inclusive future that is possible. I also want to add that these agreements were inspired by a collective in so-called Portland called the Uprise Collective. And I want to credit them for teaching me about these agreements and creating the spaces that they do. Okay, cool. Let's start. So our first topic in the past realm is something that happened earlier this week in a panel. In David Kane's History of Juggling Q&A, a viewer asked the question, has juggling always been male-dominated? And there was a problematic response from one of the panelists who said, quote, cruise ships, it's a pretty tough lifestyle and a lot of time alone, and women, they do a little bit less good with that than men with that kind of lifestyle, end quote. And I want to just talk about that for a moment. What is this comment really saying? What cultural and societal factors lead women to become underrepresented in juggling communities? And I want to throw this one to Lucy first.
Hey, well, first I want to say that, like, if y'all watch that panel, Tom Wald's response, like, pretty immediately was just so on point, because he said basically it's the Catholic Church, right? And it's about who was allowed to be on stage, because for so long the only place we saw juggling was on stage. There wasn't like this idea of juggling as a hobby. It was something that was like presented, and the only people who are allowed to do that were white men. So that contributed to this idea that juggling is this thing that is like for white men, when in fact, as other panelists mentioned, there is a very long history of women juggling, right? David Kane talked about the like Tonga. There's actually, and we talked about this in the last panel, in that Tongan history of juggling, there's like a trans non-binary juggling deity. So like this idea that juggling is exclusive to like males or masculinity is very false. And like a lot of things, it is exclusively cultural, right? And that's another thing that Tom mentioned, was there is not like a eugenic reason for this, right? Which I think was very well put, because that's what it is to say that like, oh, women don't juggle because they're not suited for it, right? I think this also has to do with how we frame juggling in our mind, right? The first jugglers I ever saw were majorettes on my high school, like, baton line. There was a girl who did 3 batons on fire every home game. There were several girls who could do 4 baton showers. They would do like all these like complicated wall playing tricks, illusions. So like that is juggling, but it is not a part of the juggling community, right? Rhythmic gymnastics, all of these things have the base elements of juggling, but like our framing of what is juggling and what is not contributes to this skewed perspective of who juggles, right? That go into this rather than like, oh, it's something that just like white guys are better at. Is that a good answer? Cool.
Any other panelists want to add to that?
Just go for it, gang.
You know, it's interesting because I didn't, when we were discussing it earlier, I didn't realize that that comment about women in juggling was couched in a comment about women on cruise ships, which is also like, you know, I think there's something there, right? Where like the underlying message and the like root belief is what Lucy was talking about a belief about women's ability, but it was like couched underneath like worry about women's ability to be on cruise ships. Whereas like really the people who I know now, like last year, who were working cruise ships were sex workers who were teaching women sex workers who were teaching workshops and doing whip workshops and things like that. So it's just something that was interesting to hear. It was like, I think that anybody can be on a cruise ship.
Yeah, and I think the idea of gender is not, you know, it's then crosses over to every industry or every realm of life, because as a traveling person, you know, if you've done any traveling, especially as soon as you dip out of the country, it's already feels rare that you meet other women traveling because of the way in which we raise our girls, right? And boys, it's like, it's a rite of passage. Go, you know, get your ass kicked. Go, you know, that's what makes you tough versus the vulnerability of even learning and movement. It's so interesting because as we prepared for this panel, I think that we're talking a lot about the marriage of tech and flow, tech being like the masculine and flow being the feminine, and the exploration of movement. Some of my favorite movement artists really embody that. And I'm a stand-up comedian also, and that's like my main thing now. And it's a sea of dicks. I'm not even going to say dudes. Like, yes, it's mainly men, but they're idiots. I know a lot of very nice stand-ups, but it's not like women aren't funny. It's like we haven't been allowed to be vulnerable, you know, in public, and to be in that struggle. And it's really tough. Entertainment on the road is really tough. That's for anybody. So in terms of just being able to like put on a happy face and be like, oh, I'm fine, but maybe you're actually not fine and you have a bunch of unprocessed grief, maybe that's easier for a dude to do. I don't know. But it crosses over to everything. This isn't just about juggling. Now, the idea that, you know, a woman wouldn't be able to travel or learn or to dance with fire or to juggle or whatever it is, you know, versus why are men just assumed to be so entitled to be able to do whatever it is. They see something, it's like, I'm going to do it.
Definitely. I want to go a little deeper into something you brought up, Sonal, about entertaining and performance, because I think within our community, there is, for female assumed performers, so many more requirements to meet before they can even set foot on stage. They're expected to be costumed and made up and sexy and have a pleasing stage presence. And at the same time, there's so many male assumed jugglers who just show up with amazing technical skill and gray sweatpants and are just applauded. So what do we do about this? How do we address what I think is toxic masculinity in a way as it presents in our community? This is open for everyone.
I'll just say that I have a very personal experience of this because I went from male presenting and like, oh, what does it take to get ready for a gig? Is like put on some striped pants and wax my ridiculous mustache. To okay, now I have like a whole like makeup and like costuming and accessories, and so I mean that's again a standard that comes from our culture. So like this idea of like these things are the bigger culture that we see in a microcosm in the juggling world. So I mean, personally, I love the presentation aspect and the stage presence aspect, and I wish that like the bar for guys would be raised. Like, look pretty on stage. Don't wear sweatpants if you're performing for people.
And there is a really interesting double standard there of like, dude, you just got to be like comfortable. And I can imagine that it's really vulnerable for the men also to be like, I want to wear something really sparkly. But for those of you who have braved that frontier, you'll notice that like it's super hot when guys are wearing leggings or anything sparkly or whatever, you know. And like as long as we're here, this is my opportunity to plug basic hygiene. Why is there a gender duality with basic hygiene? Also, I don't know when like being hippie became anonymous with like anti-showering because like the man doesn't want you to just you know, think of the ritual. It's very important. I think some of you are like working so hard and training so hard, you have no awareness of what you smell like, and that is impressive. I marry that with some basic hygiene. You know, little self-awareness. Do other people want to say stuff? Dallas, Michaela, Mel? Get in there, Dallas.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic that I've had some thoughts on, because I feel like the difference in standards is reflected in the presentation, but also as a whole. And the idea being, whatever you're doing, I have to do that times 3 to be seen at the same level, right? So like Lucy was saying, a male presenting person gets to put on the striped pants and the suspenders and like that's a good. But to do the same gig, I have to do the makeup, the wig, the sparkles, and it's like not always comfortable, but that's for me to present at a level that is seen as professional and is seen as polished, where a male presenting person is bringing this and we're seen like as an equal. And I feel like that really reflects the struggle as a woman in the juggling community. Like if I want to be seen and I want to be validated, I have to do something like 10 times as cool just for you to be like, oh, hey, look at that. And validate that and see that as valid. and how to change it. I agree. I feel like male presenting folks, like, up what you're bringing, because if we can level out the standard, the expectation a little bit, because realistically, I'm not expecting like the whole of society to quickly change the idea that women or like femme identifying folk have to be like polished and pretty. And it's great. I love a good aesthetic, but I want males are like, yeah, I want males to be like held to the same standard. And we can all just look really great. That'd be great.
I would also actually build off of that by saying why I would like to see us deconstruct standards on all parts of the spectrum. Say when it comes to performing, if I, as a femme presenting person, I don't like wearing makeup. I don't like wearing false eyelashes and sequins and like tight clothing all the time. And so like Sonal's comment, like, oh, it's about being comfortable. If it's about being comfortable, like, let me be comfortable too without being judged for it. If I want to show up to a gig with no makeup on, I would question why somebody might judge that and not judge a dude doing the same gig with no makeup. And if I don't have like a shiny costume because I'm wearing something that I identify with more, instead of just wearing something that pleases the audience or the person who's hiring me, like I would question, if you're going to take an issue with that with me, then are you going to apply that same standard to someone who presents as male?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Like, we can also deconstruct these polls, and we can look less sparkly, as we shouldn't feel so pressured to have to look sparkly. I mean, I remember the first time I saw Brecken Rivera hooping, and it was like plain black hoop, plain brown pants, and it was like, oh my God, this is so fashion forward. You know, like just everything can be fashion. We shouldn't be projecting expectations onto each other, you know, and if you like wearing makeup because it makes you feel more stage ready, then do that. And if you're like, literally nobody notices my makeup, there is no point to me wearing makeup, then don't wear makeup. And if you're a guy and you want to wear some makeup, reach out, be like, bro, can you help me with my mascara? Because it's very challenging to put mascara on. So think of it as team building activity.
You know, so, go ahead, Michaela.
Thank you. I just quickly wanted to touch on the fact that like everything that's being said right now is also a factor of, you know, as a femme presenting, also someone who, as Mel said, does not enjoy wearing makeup, putting on false eye. That's like it's like a 2-hour process if I'm trying to get something done. And generally with the skills that I work on, I value the fact that I put in hours, life hours into these skills. And I always would hope that someone would look at the skill and appreciate the same thing rather than look at me and decide, you know, you're not conventionally to standard. You're not a conventional standard in the juggling community and the rest of community. I can accept that, but it's a struggle because I really love performing art. I really like performing. I really like juggling. I really like flow arts. I really like art. But being underrepresented in all of those communities have made it very hard to just thrive. Feeling very isolated in most of those incidents. And that's like, those are the communities that I reach out to for comfort. And it's hard when you're met with this, this communal standard, cis white male, cis het male. Like it's not a comfortable place to be in as a woman of color, as a non-binary person. It's just, there's not a lot of spaces that I think we see ourselves in. And You know, that doesn't give us the opportunity to reach out and get these opportunities that you have in the same way. Like Dally said, we have to work infinitely harder to be recognized on the same level when you can literally show up in a suit and that's acceptable. Yeah.
And I also just wanted to, thank you, Michaela. I wanted to like tie in some of these things, and Sonal even mentioned, right, like reaching out for help with mascara, like that's community building. Like a lot of these things are tied together. Like the reason why there aren't as many femmes, women, non-binary people, queers in some of these spaces is the lack of care in these spaces. And this is something that I brought up and we were talking about when we were preparing, but it was like when you men take care of yourselves, when you start practicing self-care, that's when you're able to extend that care outwards. Suddenly, like you're caring for yourself a little bit more, and then the space feels like there's more care in it. So the women in it, the femmes in it can be like, whoa, this man is suddenly like caring about if I'm hydrated, is caring about me getting into my outfit, is wondering if, you know, like all these levels of care. And so I think they're actually connected. Start caring for yourself so you can start caring for some of the people who don't feel safe in these spaces.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, it really is like if somebody asks like, are you guys drinking water? It's like, oh my God, are we in love? Are we, because we're just so disconnected from that level of like basic self-care, you know? And I mean, and these we're talking in general. For sure, there are a lot of incredible people in this community who very much care about each other, and that's why we have to have these conversations.
Definitely. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to give a shout out to Sarah and Glenna for your donations. They just came in and will be shared across the panel. Our Venmos are in the comments on all platforms, so send away. If you send it to me, I will distribute it across all panelists and give you a shout out. So, next question. We're going to go a route talking a little bit about language. So we've noticed there's terms in juggling which are historically gendered, like the gentleman juggler. And there are props that are culturally gendered. For example, you know, hoops are a woman's prop. And at the same time, if you single out that someone is a woman juggler, it kind of exceptionalities that role. So I think that encouraging jugglers to be mindful about their language may be part of the solution to making the environment more inclusive. And I want to know, panelists, how does juggling language affect you? Do you have any pet peeves? And how and why is language important?
I know Lucy's, we're not calling it Mill's mess anymore. It's just the mess.
I mean, that's one that I think like there's been a lot of conversations around. You know, I don't want to go like too far into that like interpersonal drama.
No, but I feel like that's a good starting point.
Yeah, like, you know, I have this tattoo, right, of the Egyptian jugglers, and here you see like that's, you know, that's a mess pattern. You know, it's a static image, so we don't know exactly what it is. And I understand the value of like having clear names for things, but also it's like this idea of the like colonization of juggling, right? This idea that we have evidence of a 4,000-year-old Egyptian lady, right? And yet we name this pattern after a white guy who's pretty problematic. You know, so like that language matters a lot. I think it also is tied into these like feeling really like rigidly adhering to preconceptions, right? Like yeah, I saw somebody talking about an upcoming juggling video, and somebody said, "Hey, are you going to do rings in it?" And they said, "Yeah, I do all 3 shapes." Right? So this this idea that, like, yes, I know what juggling is, right? And there was, we were talking about the history panel, and there was a meme about it, and somebody like didn't know that context, right? And so, but rather than saying like, what is this about, it was, this has nothing to do with juggling, right? So this idea that, oh, I am an authority on what juggling is, right? And like, I know how we should talk about juggling. It pushes people out rather than like making more space for them. But like, the thing to remember is like, even when these conflicts happen, or when you like get challenged in something that you hold as a part of your identity, like, oh, juggling's really important to me, I see it this one specific way, and when somebody like tells me that I'm wrong about it, I feel personally attacked. But it's the same, those conflicts are the same thing that we experience in juggling when we drop, right? Like, oh, something wasn't working, something wasn't serving me. So this is an opportunity to learn and change and grow and get better. So, we do that with juggling. Let's do that with our conversations about juggling. So like, stay in them and be open to growing, getting better.
So I just want to hop on that as well, because I recently listened to a panel that feels super relevant and talks about basically these same exact issues, but in rock climbing. And it was a panel put on by a group called Brown Girls Climb. And one of the things that they discussed, which I think is super pertinent and doesn't get talked about enough, is the land that people are climbing on, the land that the climbing routes are bolted on, and how the like Native communities from that land typically get erased from that conversation and from that community, excluded from the community, which is a largely like white bro, like sporty guy dominated community. And then on top of that, you have people naming the routes that they bolted, oftentimes really offensively. And some of them are like include racial slurs against Indigenous people, include language that is offensive towards Black people and women and people of color. And there's this like, I see that as a huge proxy for what we're talking about in juggling as well, because there's like this colonization aspect of it, and this co-opting of a group of people who moved in on somebody else's, territory essentially, and erased them from that place. And then like adds insult to injury by deciding that they have to name these routes in the first place, something that they decided, and then naming them something that's really offensive. And then there's also like, to add to that a little bit more, there's like terminology that people use in climbing where when you're the first person to bolt a route and then it gets recorded somewhere, you're referred to as the first ascender or the first ascensionist. And I didn't think about language until I listened to this panel pointed out, like, no, the like white guy from out of town who just comes here to climb on the weekends and bolted a route there was probably not the first person to ascend that rock. They were not the first person there. And to assume that they were, just because they went up with an impact driver and some bolts, that's just like really, I don't know, arrogant, narcissistic, and erases the history of the people who were there before.
I want to also touch off of that and just, I think when using language in any community that you're a part of, really being mindful of intersectionality and inclusivity. when you're speaking, just like being mindful that you don't know, like if you're out somewhere at a convention, at a meetup, at like a flow night, and you meet somebody and I think we should talk about presenting a little bit, like we all have our presentation. I can present femme quite often, even though maybe that's not what I'm feeling like. So you walk up to me and you're talking to me like a stereotypical woman. It's just one of those, it's one of those things of you need to really think about the other person's disposition and who they really might be, and not what you're perceiving of them from the outside. I don't know how to break that down easier, but like I've had a lot of masculine presenting persons in my life that have always come with stories that like another masculine presenting person, usually a cis straight person, walks up to my friend and says something that's just offensive as fuck and expects that person, my friend, to be on board, that it's funny or a joke, whether it's about gender or race or sexual orientation, and they just expect this camaraderie to happen, not realizing that my friend is like on this spectrum, not what you would expect from a cis presenting male identified person, and how you think words are coming out and what the meaning actually are, I guess I'm sorry, and how that might affect somebody. Like, I don't know, your language affects people around you, and if you don't actually know someone to their core, saying things that you don't think through very well can be very hurtful and harmful without you even knowing. Like misgendering, we talked about that earlier. Simple, it happens, but know how to own up and apologize instead of getting defensive and upset. We all make mistakes, it happens, but you just have to think about your language. You just have to think about what you're saying, because you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what someone might be dealing with and what you're about to say and how it affects them. We don't really think that deeply when we speak to people. We just kind of make conversation and we don't think about whether this person is maybe in the middle of a transition that's not outwardly visible, but you say something super transphobic without knowing it, and how detrimental that can be to somebody who's like trying to come into themselves. So in a space that's super male dominated, things can be said, like Trump said, locker room talk type conversation. And like, you really got to think things through. There's just so many things that can be said that are funny and joking that really isn't. It's not funny. It's not a welcoming environment. It doesn't make people who don't identify as the majority that you see want to come in and experience these places and these things and you as people per se. So I don't know, you just really got to think about what's being said, how you're saying it, and like look at the person that you're saying it to and being mindful of them and who they are.
Dallas, I know you're waiting to say, I just want to give a quick empowerment spin on, because I know everyone's feeling like, oh, you just can't say anything anymore. And it's like there is an invitation happening here where it's like you have the power to impact your environment in immeasurable ways. So get involved with that. Like how, accountability, it's not like, oh my God, you've done something wrong, now you're going to be canceled. What is the process of taking responsibility for your actions? The same way that like it's like a metaphor, this juggling stuff. When you drop something, sometimes it's no big deal, right? It's like, okay, I'm learning, you pick it up, you get right back in. And sometimes you're like, and it's so frustrating. So just, manage that impact, and really we have the power to affect ourselves so much. So then how are we affecting the environment around us? Dallas, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off some things that were already said about language and how our casual conversation can really impact people. personally, I remember when I first began my journey with prop manipulation, hearing a really commonly held belief that flow was somehow less valid than tech. And I really feel like there's parallels between like masculine and feminine there, right? Flow being like fluid and moving and expressive and almost emotional at times, and tech being more like rigidly defined and yeah, like more numbers. I've heard things said like, I mean, hating on flow in general, which is like, wow, like my form of expression is not as valid as yours. And also things like with jugglers, just within the juggling community, like I've heard someone say who was a really great juggler, like, oh, I'm not a real juggler until I can juggle 5. And that rigidity is like, it's limiting for yourself and for all of us. If we can really be open to the idea that these different forms of expression are enhanced with variety, and each expression is just as valid, the masculine, the feminine, and everything in between and off the spectrum, like we allow ourselves more freedom, and I think we really can all benefit from that. And just a reminder, yeah, that like we should check our own beliefs about what is valid expression, what is really actually juggling, and we should check and be aware, like was said earlier, of our language and the things that we perpetuate through our language and our conversations, because we don't have like a rhetoric or just a commonly held belief for all of us. So it's in these small conversations, the things you overhear from your friends and people that are part of your community that set the precedent, or set I don't know, what's the word? Sets the understanding of like what is valid and what is not. And that's very harmful. It can be very discouraging.
I feel so much what you said about you're not a real juggler until you learn 5. I was taught that as a juggler. I've perpetuated that as a juggler. And I think it is harmful to gatekeep the community in that way. And it also excludes, like, okay, in one way that pushed me to learn 5. Like, okay, I made it, I'm a juggler now. But also that assumes that I have the access to resources for 5 props and for the amount of time it takes to do that. And the physical ability to train 5, which is athletic and challenging. Yeah.
I want to say something about go ahead, Dallas. Go ahead. Go.
Thanks. And I have seen it, that's why I'm saying it's self-limiting too. It's like I've seen such amazing things happen with 3 clubs, and I didn't feel like I was lacking anything. 1 club, and so by having that rhetoric of like, oh, it's not real juggling until it's this, it's like we're also harming ourselves in that by not giving ourselves the creative freedom to really like allow what we can do with 3 to come through. Like, you are juggling, like that is also juggling. Anytime you're like manipulating a prop like that, you're doing it. And by telling yourself you're not, it's just like we're harming ourselves in that also, as well as perpetuating the understanding in the language that like you're not this until you're that. And everybody is doing a great job, all the way up till 5, or even if you don't have any idea or you don't want to go to 5, or it's let's not limit ourselves because it's all valid.
I want to kind of just little tangent into this idea of like tech and flow. I think also has, again, like this bias towards certain props, right? Like the poi juggling in the Cascade of Stars last night from Bo was beautiful, right? And like, it's such a common thing to see people making fun of poi in juggling groups. And it's so hard. three poi it's the hardest thing to juggle, like hands down. It's the hardest like prop to manipulate in, especially if you're talking about toss juggling, right? And so like going back to language, like defining juggling as only throwing and catching, I think is really problematic. And it's this bias towards like, oh, this technical thing that is difficult. I see a lot of that mentality like going hand in hand with, because what I've learned is difficult, you other person watching should appreciate it, right? And it's really mind-boggling to me to see that, because a lot of the people I see doing that make very little effort to make what they're doing relatable to other people, right? So we're in this interesting period of juggling where there are a lot of people who just do it as a hobby, right? They just like the physical act of like throwing something or spinning something, or like, you know, they like the way it feels to do without much focus on how I'm presenting it to other people, right? So when you do like have to think about presenting juggling to a non-juggler, to somebody who doesn't understand the complicated site swap that you're doing, right? Who the 3 different site swap that you just did all look the same to them, right? It brings this new appreciation for what flow brings to a performance, right? And like, honestly, simple tricks done cleanly and smoothly transitioning between them have way more impact on people who are watching, right? And when you think about your object manipulation, your juggling in terms of a vocabulary, and you think about your performance in terms of a visual narrative, then like juggling gives us this really unique opportunity to communicate very quickly this like a lot about ourselves. Like I've obviously spent a lot of time getting really good at this, and you can tell immediately, right? Just by my 5-ball flash or my 3 poi pattern, you can tell how much skill and time and cultivation has gone into this. So if you do want to present your juggling to other people, making it relatable to them is as important as the technical aspect of what you're doing, right? So I think that's important.
I wanted to say something about the language thing, like even and with the past, present, future, because I started much more on the flow side, and I was much more I was in Europe, and you're, you know, and I was with Spanish people, so it's like malabares, you're a malabarista. It's a very different feeling. And it's only, you know, in terms of what I would want in terms of inclusivity, I would love to be able to walk through my world in Chicago and it's like, yeah, someone juggles. Oh, dope. You juggle? Oh, word. Okay, I've done a little bit of juggling, but it's not like that. It's like, you what? You juggle? God, you're so random. And it's like, it's very dorky. You know, it's only, I remember in college, I was totally into this juggling. I'm like, wow, look at him. And all these other bitches were like, oh my God, he's such a loser. So the whole idea of like, now we've all been colonized by the idea of like free expression and movement is supposed to be like dorky. And for losers, I feel like that's a really American thing. So, I mean, they were very sexy, these South American jugglers that I was hanging out with. Girl, they were very hot. And the French jugglers, so rude, so hot. And I mean, it's culturally how it exists really differently in different places in the world. I think that women are invited. I mean, in South America, I had some Chilean girlfriends who were just like, boom, 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 check my moves. And it didn't matter, you know, like what setup, what hardware we were coming with. So just the idea of the concept of juggling you know, and what that word means, how that moves through the world, you know, because I feel a little protective of it because I don't want to explain stuff to people all the time. I just want to move happily over here, you know. And there's so many people that we know that don't perform. I totally support those people, you know, who are like, this is my personal practice. I think everybody here is in a performer realm, and it's already such a different element, you know. Yeah, the language is very, we're all affected by it.
I really like the term that Dallas used just now is self-limiting, and I feel like we can say a lot about that. I think that that term can be applied to oneself as an individual and also us as a community. And I want to bring attention to that because I think there's a really important distinction that has to be made where everybody's reason for practicing is valid. I feel like everybody has maybe a different reason, but that's personal to them. And it's different for everybody, but it's valid for what it is. And if that's what drives you to keep going and pursuing your thing and it's bringing you joy, that's super important. And if what that looks like is, oh, someone I respect told me that like I should work towards such and such hard thing. And that's like something I'm going to hold as a vision to work towards. And I'm going to stop drilling it until I get there. Then I think that that's a positive thing. I think that where the like problem comes into it is through language, it's through those inherent biases where if that person's saying to you, you're not a real juggler until you can do this thing, that's the problem. Like the problem is not inherently in the fact that you have a line that's above your head and you're reaching for it and you're working hard to get there. But the problem is like how it's presented and how that could potentially exclude other people. So I think that it's important. Language is super important. Language makes people feel a certain way. Language can perpetuate harm or it can include people who otherwise feel marginalized. And I just want to like make a plug, I guess, for having people both think more, just try to think more about your language before it comes out your mouth. And also if something comes out of your mouth and you're like, oops, I have second thoughts about that, own it and hold yourself accountable and recognize how you might have harmed somebody or excluded somebody and do better next time and move on. So both of those things. And like when we apply that term self-limiting to the community as a whole, I think that that's where those things add up. Like excluding language or problematic language. All those things, when you perpetuate it as an entire community, is going to end up doing a whole lot of harm to a whole lot of people and making them not feel welcome. So I just like, I guess like, I didn't want to overlook the fact that people's reasons for having their personal practice and whatever it is that motivates them to keep going, I think that's a good thing for everybody to have and it's valid, but I also want to challenge everybody to examine, okay, why are you doing it though? Like, are you doing a certain thing because somebody told you that you wouldn't be accepted as some label until you could achieve that thing? If that's the reason why you're doing it, then maybe you should examine that and sit with it a little bit longer and maybe adjust that to have a more like accepting and healthy mindset.
Thank you all. There's so many amazing topics within what we were just talking about in different directions. We could go with all of that. I want to switch gears, just given the time, and go a little bit into the future section. I also want to give a shout out to Lindsay, Natalie, Matan for donating to our panelists. Thank you so much. Donations came in and it's appreciated. So as we move into talking about the future of these panels, I think there's two main questions I want to ask, and we don't have to spend so much time on this first one, but this statement comes from the Dismantling Racism workbook, and I adapted it to a gender and sexism viewpoint. So a feminist approach with organizations won't start with the premise or suggestion that an organization must recruit women. Certain groundwork needs to be done before that's a viable or advisable goal. The organization might begin with a male privilege training rather than a diversity training. The goal is to create an organizational culture with a deep and shared understanding of sexism, where people of the dominant culture are committed to holding themselves accountable, and where naming sexism and other oppression wherein it occurs is encouraged and not avoided. Without these qualities in place, women might find a harsh reality beneath the welcoming organizational veneer. Too long, didn't read. You can't just invite women to a festival and call yourself inclusive because you haven't laid the groundwork for them to be safe or included. And I want to ask the panel, like, what kind of groundwork do you feel needs to happen by organizations? And this goes for, big organizations, people running festivals, to people running your juggling club and anyone in a position of power. What are some suggestions you would give for groundwork for those folks to do?
I would say when it's a viable option to bring in people who are not male, people who represent all of the people within the community, people of color, people on the genders, like different gender spectrums. It's just getting an atmosphere to the point of being able to bring those people in is hard. You really have to have a shared mindset. So future-wise, I really think to be able to get the dialogues started is key. Things like this, honestly, things that just start to put it out there, and eventually having folks talk about it, eventually having the people who attend these things speak about this with their friends in the community and have like a genuine conversation about this with their friends. Say something if you see something is also really important. I think at events and places where, someone may be branching out and going, even if they don't feel safe, ensuring that there is at least yourself looking out for people who, might otherwise feel very unprotected in that sense. I definitely say these conversations, trainings, if there are ones that are decent, I'm not really sure what trainings there are out there. So I can't attest to how well those actually work or not. But I think seeing the change personally in every individual is kind of where it starts. You have to open yourself up to hearing these things, feeling the way you feel while you hear these things, and projecting what you're learning into your community. Like, that's how we generally weed folks out of communities, right? We say, we don't stand for this. This is not acceptable here. And this is, an all-inclusive place. We care about like everyone's safety here. And I definitely think being that change and stepping up to the plate and taking on, the burden that most of us carry, being someone who's not standard by any means, just look out for people. Like, hear our experiences, try to be empathetic, try to be understanding, and be someone who we can look to in those situations when things get weird, because inevitably they do get weird. It always gets weird. There's always something that happens that's just like, why did this have to happen? And those things would feel less scary if I knew 5 people in the same area were looking out for me to be sure that if something like that were to happen, that like I have backup and I have people who are going to be sure that if that escalates, I have people to turn to. I think, and that applies for everyone, literally just have each other's back and be a decent human being. I would love that for the future.
I just want to emphasize one of the things you said, Michaela, about have conversations with your friends, right? Because that peer group is so important. Like our reach of our voices, because we are different than the people we are trying to reach, right? Is that our impact is limited, right? So if we're reaching you, right, the viewer of this panel, then it is up to you to then like pay that forward and have that conversation. If when you see your like dude bro friend juggler like saying, oh yeah, hoops are for chicks or whatever, right? Like challenge that, right? There's like, what about Bob Branson, right? So yeah, like challenge your friends, but do it in a nice way. That's the other thing that you said that was really like resonating with me, is like, be a nice person about it. Because the goal is not to cancel people. The goal is not to chase people out of the community. The goal is to keep people in these conversations, because that's how we're going to improve all of us, ourselves, and this like beautiful little community that we have. Because as much as we are like talking about like, hey, there are these problems with the juggling community, I do want to say that like, personally, the juggling community has been like life-saving and life-changing for me, right? I was so nervous to come back to my first IJA after I transitioned, because like, you know, I was a boy when I came to my first IJA, and then like 10 years later, I came back like, you know, hi, I'm Lucy and I have boobs now. Right? I'm gonna wear real tiny shorts in the gym. And you know, there were some awkward things, but the overall experience was so positive. And this community has so many wonderful positive things, right? So don't take our attempts to improve it as condemnation, right? Because like personally, I love y'all. I love jugglers. I love the nerdy jugglers. I love the rude, sexy French jugglers. The ones with face tattoos. Anyway, you know, just be nice to each other and try to help everybody.
I want to jump in quickly too. One, we talked a little bit about tone policing before too, but if someone's like violent or like violently racist, you actually don't have to be nice to them. Just putting that out there. Being nice is awesome, but like sometimes like we need men to go to other men and be like, yo, that's not all right. Like be real, like get riled up for us femmes. But I also want to say, like, there was a comment, right? Like, any suggestion on how an enlightened 79-year young white man can contribute in a positive way. And I think talking about the future and talking about the future of these spaces, like, there's a people can notice when you're trying. Trying in any shape or form is felt. Like, I know being trans, like, if someone is saying their pronouns, like, that's immediately felt. If they're messing up the pronouns and my pronouns and they apologize, that trying, even if there's a mess up, is immediately felt. And suddenly I'm like, whoa, like there's, again, care here. So like, just try to do some of the things that some of these awesome performers and jugglers have been saying. Like, try changing your language a little bit. Try catching yourself. I was also thinking, you know, just really quickly before I end, like, again, about the comment of how like women like can't handle being on cruise ships. I'm like, men can't handle like being checked on their emotions and like can't handle like having to sit with themselves. Like, let's talk, you know, like, how about you like really push yourselves to sit with how you're feeling and like how you're making other people feel, etc.
I want to share a quick anecdote in terms of anecdote. Yeah, I speak English, and in what men y'all. I was at a juggling convention in Dublin, Ireland, and it's me and the dude bros, you know, and this is a very white group, you know, Ireland, the motherland of the white folks, and I was going to a drag show. It was like day 3, and I was so hyped because I was meeting like one of my friends who was going to perform, and it's like me and a bunch of, you know, like the stoned out jugglers, and I'm like, let's go, we're gonna go see another performance, we're going to the drag show, and it's like 10 of them, and they're all looking at me like I'm crazy, and I felt so abandoned by my juggling community in that moment because they were like, ew, I'm not going to that, you know. Nobody like said that, but that was the vibe of like, I wouldn't feel comfortable unless I'm with 8 other dudes who are doing the same thing as me, you know. And then like I went by myself to the drag show and I cried. My Brazilian friend was Ariel and did like Part of Your World. I'm like, this was better than anything that I saw at the juggling convention. It was very emotional. Like, dudes, go to more drag shows. I'm serious. This is better for your personal evolution. That is a level of performance. I want to see more marriage of drag and juggling. I think that would help females to feel more included. Because it's so funny, the idea of like, oh, female can't handle the road or trans, like, is truly, dudes, you can't even handle like being aware of your own breath or being called out on it. Like, here you go, here's a piece of gum. You're welcome. It's like, bitch, what a bitch. And then you're a bitch for like caring about other people's hygiene, you know? Yeah, community is very interesting. And I love you guys so much. I feel like any of y'all would have been like, let's go to the drag show. That's what we need right now. Yeah.
So I'm going to hop in here because we have about 15 minutes left. I want to give a shout out to Eric, Book, Max, Nicholas, and Chase. Thank you all so much for your donations. They will be distributed across the panel. Amazing. Okay, so I want to ask one more question and then let's work in some Q&A because I think this is really important. The question is, how do we center these dialogues, the ones that we're having, as part of the general event and not just an afterthought? How can we build it in such a way that it evolves into the main infrastructure of everything? And how can we learn to value this work such that it creates a lasting change? I want to send this to Mel and Dallas because I know you two had some thoughts on this during our prep, but it's open to everyone.
Yeah, so I can start off with just a couple of my thoughts, and other people will chime in because I feel like I've talked a lot. So I guess I just want to start by saying this work is super important, and I'm really glad that we have spaces to focus on it. And also, like, in the various communities that I'm in, which are all not necessarily connected, some of them are very different from each other, but in all of them, the injustice issues, social and racial and gender injustice issues, are just rampant and gaining attention now in all of these places. And so far, a lot of the work that people have done to talk about it and to try and make it better feels still to me like, even though we are getting somewhere, that it still feels like it's not equated to the like main focus of whatever that community is, whether it's the science community or juggling and flow or Burning Man or whatever it is. All the conversations just feel like, oh, it's a side thing. It's, you know, only the people who really care are going to even start the conversation and put the effort into it. And we're expected to do it for free or for like cheap, you know, because it's not given the same platform that the like main activity, whatever it is, might be. So my question is like, okay, if we start having festivals in person again, are our discussions around social justice going to be given the same platform as prop workshops? Or is it always forever doomed to be thought of as like an afterthought or like a Band-Aid type situation where, okay, we recognize it's an issue, but we kind of consider it off topic from the main focus of this community or event. So it's always going to be shunted to the side.
I think that was really well said, Mel. I enjoy and I appreciate, and I think it's really crucial to have things like what we're experiencing right now, this panel discussion type of thing, where it's like, let the people who need to be heard be heard. But I really feel like that's such a small part of the system that needs to change, right? We have to, in listening and in hearing people's perspectives, we need to also then take that and go within and do the work and have lasting commitments to change. That's what I really want to emphasize, lasting commitments to change, not just like, oh, we brought in a panel and that was cool. And now like, you know, we checked that box, like we're good on that. Like it takes having the conversations with your friends, educating yourself about other people's perspectives. And for organizations, like I'm really looking to see now that we're becoming more aware of these things, like where is your money going? Who is on the board of directors? Who's in charge of hiring, booking, producing? Is there diversity in gender, ethnicity, like all the above? And you know, like where are you sourcing your things? Like, are you giving your money to a femme or woman-owned business or a person of color-owned business? Like there are so many things that we can commit to do over and over and over, besides just like we did this one-time thing and now we feel good about ourselves. It's really taking the next step and going beyond. And it can be something very simple, like I will only buy my juggling props from a woman-owned business or something like that, you know, or for an organization to look at itself and be like, wow, we actually don't have a lot of diversity here. Someone needs to step down and give or we need to just bring someone else up, you know, because it's not just like, I hear a lot of this concept of like, we need to just bring people in. We need more people of color here. It's like, how do we get them here? And it's like, you have to create the environment, which takes all of us doing the work, having the conversations with each other and like continuing to evolve as a community and commitments to lasting change.
I just quick wanted to merge those two. I think Mel's point, like this is work for us to share our experiences and talk about these things. So in order for them to become center, like they have to be a priority. So if you are someone who is in the position to make things like this happen when we go back to possibly having IRL events, like making sure that there is a workshop or a panel that has something to do with, you know, diversity, gender, like racial equality, just the important things that affect every community. Like it's not a separate topic, that this happens within every community, including the juggling community, and that it's important that we keep it at the forefront, because when you push things back, we forget and we regress, and it's very easy as humans to do that. So making the space, if you have the ability, make the space, pay your people, because this is labor. So, you know, everyone, it shouldn't be a, here's a free ticket to this event. You really got to think about those things. That's kind of a slap in the face. Like, you should be getting paid to talk about these things, and it should be at the forefront. It should be up there with everything else that's important to that festival or the community that it's being served to. And then on top of that, like, you know, doing these things, making these spaces more inclusive and safer will get folks that you want to see out to come out. It's doing the work and the people will come, not so much shoving the people in the space and hoping that that solves anything. So for sure that those two things, you have to be willing to pay people for their worth, because that's historically just been an issue with, you know, pay gap. Women expected to be doing things for a lot less and having to put a ton more work in. Emotionally, we already do a lot of labor for free. And in these situations and opportunities, like, if you want to see this change in your community, you have to prioritize it. So in order for it to become like a part of a general event, we've got to have people out there who are in the position to make it an important centric part to the event, because it is.
I love the point. I love all of that. I love the point too that Dallas brought up about who's on your board of directors and who are in positions at the executive level. I feel like diversity without within an organization, like, inclusion won't happen until that inclusion happens at the executive level. I saw that a little bit in the comments too, of like, put trans people in positions of power, put POC in positions of power. And if you don't do that, it will just actually like shield that status quo, and the gatekeepers won't actually be sharing that power, and it can turn into more of like a performative and not good thing. So we have just a couple minutes left. I said we would get some Q&As. We have answered a few that have come into us. If you're viewing and have a question, drop it in the Q&A. We'll try and get to some. You know, a lot that are coming up that I don't think we have enough time to talk about, but it is very important to mention, are a few questions of, like, has the Me Too movement been a part of the juggling scene, and how can we hold people accountable when incidents happen, assault and sexism and all of those things? Big question. That's important to talk about. I think we have a whole another panel about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, on the inclusivity, we all just want to see each other in a state of wonder, exploring, throwing shit and spinning shit around. And really, as I'm sitting here, I can't think of anything that could be said on this panel to get like any of my childhood friends to come to a juggling. You know, it's a very brave thing, or it's I don't know what it is that clicks, that has to click in somebody to have the audacity to pick something up and throw it and drop it so many times, or, you know, like hit yourself with a hoop or whatever it is. And when you see somebody in that process, really nurture that. Because I've seen people try to come into the community and be pushed out so immediately with like, oh, you do poi? What do you do? Show me your moves. Show me your moves. You know, I tried to bring somebody to a flow event many years ago, and he's like, oh, I'm never going back. I felt like I didn't have the right belt thing, and he just felt like he didn't have the right stuff to be there. So that's really interesting about how we create all this signaling, and what can we do so that people can be in this state of wonder and movement, I think is good questions to be asking ourselves. How can we expand the community? And I mean, yeah, is the Me Too are there Juggle Boys getting canceled? I'm not that deep in the community, so where's the Me Too gossip? We need another panel for that, probably. And somebody said, how does an unenlightened 79-year-old young white man contribute in a positive way during this pandemic? I don't know, TikTok? I feel like that's the best. Wes says no. I don't know. I don't know.
Says West.
What do you suggest, West? How can a 79-year young white man contribute in a positive way?
Yeah, like I mentioned it earlier that just trying helps, right? Like just any sort of attempt, right? Like we're not asking you to like, I mean, there's the old adage, an old dog can't learn new tricks, right? But like an old dog can try. And I think that's what's important. It's like, are you just continuing to perpetuate what you knew, what had worked, what was good, then what you've always done? Or are you like trying to change? And I think like for someone, like if someone is like seeped into older ways of acting, me seeing that they're just even attempting to change, that they're questioning and opening themselves up, is the energy that we're asking for, and shows the like 20-year-olds, right? Like you could be doing that too, and you got time to do more of it. Like do it now.
I think that also kind of piggybacks onto the how can we actually hold people accountable when incidents happen. So many people are still accepted in this community, even when their wrongdoings are widely known. I think what Wes said also kind of applies to the situation of, is this person actively trying to better themselves? I always want, that first. Cancel culture, I think, is appropriate in some orders, and I think we also have to give people room to grow and improve when they show they are being genuine about it. I'm a firm believer that like we do have to allow folks to evolve. It does happen, and to stunt somebody's ability to become a better person just because they weren't in the past is harmful to a certain extent. But there's also a healthy limit to know when maybe someone is just best left on their own, and that when you decipher what side of the door we're on here, just seeing something or saying something when you see something, like holding folks accountable is something that you do just in saying, hey, I saw what you did, I heard what you said, that's inappropriate. And that's the most effective way to get other folks to listen. You hear it or you see it, immediately saying something, because likely you're not the only one who heard it or saw it, and the possibility that other people were offended or upset by it, but just weren't brave enough to speak up for whatever reason. It's literally just a matter of social accountability. We as a community need to stick together and have these things that we find acceptable and not acceptable socially, and when we see things that we don't feel are acceptable or safe, stand up. Like it takes one person. It literally takes one person to just be like, this is not okay, in order for other people to feel confident enough to be like, yes, this affected me negatively and we need to shut it down. Yeah.
Thank you. So we have 1 minute, kind of out of time. There's so many, we could continue this conversation, and we will continue this conversation. This is a cause for life. I love Dali's commitment. I forget the exact words. Commitment to lasting commitments to change, right? So important. I want to give a shout out to Max, Nicholas, Chase, JC, Luna, Joe, and Madeline for your donations. Those came in. Thank you so much. We have our Venmos in the comments for all our panelists. You can check out the links on the IJA website, which has handles for Instagram for all of our panelists, Venmos. Give every one of these panelists a follow, because on their social medias, everyone is posting juggling and flow content and continuing these conversations in the captions and comment sections, but also are just amazing people to support and to bring more art into your life. Thank you all so much for being on this panel, for dedicating your time to these conversations. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. Please take care of yourselves after this. Drink some water, do what you need to feel good. And that goes for all the viewers too, who are maybe challenged in some of the things that they learned and thought about today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Josie, for all the work that you've done to moderate and work with us.
Thank you so much for that panel. Thank you, all of you. That was amazing. I'm not going to try and add anything to it. I'm just going to move on to our next program. We will be streaming the winners of the championships coming up next, right after a brief PSA from one of our board members.
Thank you so much, guys. Great panel.
Hi, my
Yay!
name is Anna, and I'm the IJA Board of Directors. Welcome to IJA 2020 Online. I hope you're enjoying the festival. I also hope you'll take this opportunity to become an IJA member. To be honest, while I don't love everything the IJA does, there are many programs I find to be deeply inspiring and well worth our support. The Youth Juggling Academy, Props to You, and the IRCs, to name a few. Here in quarantine times, the annual cost of membership at $29 is approximately the same as my weekly alcohol budget. Membership also grants you vendor discounts, member-only content, and discounted performer insurance as well. While you're juggling links this week, I hope you'll take some time to browse through the rest of juggle.org and check out all that we do. Thanks, and I'll see you on the screens. Cool.
Isn't it strange? Feels like I'm looking in the mirror. What would people say if only they knew that I was part of some geneticist plan? Born to be a carbon copy man. There in a petri dish late one night, they took a donor's body cell and fertilized a human egg. And so I say, I think I'm a clone now. There's always two of me just hanging around. I think I'm a clone now, 'cause every chromosome is a hand-me-down. Look at the way we go out walking close together. I guess you could say I'm really beside myself. I still remember how it began. They produced a carbon copy man, born in a science lab late one night without a mother or a...
From my heart and from my hand, why don't people understand my intention? Plastic tubes and pots and pans, bits and pieces, and the magic from my hand will make it weird science. Oh, things I've never seen before. High voltage boys and an imagination. Weird science. Not what teachers said to do, making dreams come true. Living tissue, warm flesh. Weird science. Oh, plastic tubes and pots and pans, bits and pieces, and bits and pieces. My creation. Is it real? It's my creation. Oh, my creation. It's my creation. Weird science. Weird. Weird science. Magic and technology, voodoo dolls and chance, electricity will make it weird science. Fantasy and microchips, shooting from the hip, something different will make it weird science. Oh, pictures from a magazine, diagrams and charts. recipe. Bits and pieces and bits and pieces. So my creation isn't real. It's my creation. I do not know. No hesitation. No heart of gold. Just flesh and blood. I do not know. I do not know. From my heart and from my hand, why don't people understand my intentions? Technology, with science, things I've never seen before. Behind open doors, with science, not what teachers said to do. Bits and pieces, bits and pieces, bits of my creation. Is it real? It's my creation. I do not know. No hesitation. No heart of gold, it's flesh and blood. I do not know. It's my creation. It's my creation. Oh, my creation. Ooh, my creation. It's my creation. From my heart and from my hand. Why don't people understand my intentions?